the New Red Order. And so the New Red Order is a public secret society that takes a critical yet humorous look at desires for indigeneity and at the quote-unquote authenticity imperative that is often imposed on individuals identifying as Indigenous. NRO explores the attraction to Indigenous epistemologies and the ways in which colonizers attempted to appropriate them, both intentionally and unintentionally. Through interdisciplinary projects, NRO sets out to destabilize these colonial attitudes and expand Indigenous agency. And so with that, I will pass the mic to Kite and Jackson.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm going to share my screen. Great. Okay. I made these patches. Okay, there you go, Jackson.
Can we go back to the former slide? I'm
Yeah.
not sure I can stand looking at myself as a snake quite yet. I'm starting to feel guilty. Yeah, just a little bit about the New Red Order. Thank you, Prakash, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you, Alexandra Clark, for allowing for this exhibition. Thank you, Shani and Rob. My apologies for my pronunciation. I'm I guess an Anglophone, not quite by default, but I'll attempt to keep it moving. So feel free to interrupt at any time if you have any questions or concerns as we delve into our project. So just a little recap, the New Red Order is a public secret society dedicated to examining desires for indigeneity. We work to confront and rechannel longstanding and overlooked desires for indigeneity that lie at the core of the formations of both nationalized identities and what start to appear as progressive identity formations. We do so through work with informants, accomplices. We acknowledge our own, the dynamic of informing on our own cultures, and we ask others to inform with us on their own desires for indigeneity and relationship or perhaps reticence in that regard. We'll move to the next slide. Thank you, Kite, for being at the wheel here. I'm Jackson Polys. I'm Indigenous, so just want to acknowledge that Indigenous, by its etymology, connotes the prior and the push of Indigenous people into the past as perhaps one of the defining characteristics as opposite those who might come after to replace them. I'm Indigenous to what is currently called Alaska. I'm Tlingit on my father's side. Yeah, can we go to the next slide? Tlingit on my father's side, among the people whose many belongings were removed from their people, remain removed, and exist either in exhibit or in basement vaults thousands of miles from their people. So, on a positive note, the New Red Order aims to enlist accomplices to examine their own desires for indigeneity through a few modes, which involve contract, concealment, and capture. So contract is perhaps, among other things, the recognition of the feeling, which may be elusive, the feeling of wanting to feel at home here, feeling a distance from indigeneity. This can apply to Indigenous people as well. And in order to safely pursue that feeling, NRO offers concealment through various means of engagement and interlocution with core members and informants in NRO. When this happens, one of the possibilities that's offered is to pursue capture, to find ways to reverse the moments of capture that have contributed to the locking into place of Native people. Next slide. Sorry, I'm going to forget to advance to the next slide. So we'll just keep it moving. One of the options, once capture has occurred, which can be enabled through iPhone apps, some of which are no longer in use, but still the opportunity for photogrammetry exists still for many, which involves taking multiple photos from different angles and then combining them into a formula that then outputs a 3D model that can then be manipulated. Thanks, Kite. Keeping it moving. In this institution where many of these objects are located, we find that Indigenous people are everywhere put into contiguity and dialogue with the earliest humans. Next slide. NRO members have the capacity and the, I guess, contested permissions to then capture and be inspired by various cultures. Keep it moving. And perhaps in the pursuit of other institutions to occupy. This enables a self-reflection on one's own capacity to approach a form of indigeneity that might be inspiring. Next. This can often involve aspects of playing Indian or dressing up as Indian. The Improved Order of the Red Men is where the New Red Order emerges out of contradistinction from. So one of the opportunities is to allow for people who have done this kind of plain Indian to act in relation with those people in order to find out what it might mean to rectify the violence done to Indigenous people. This can involve going outside of institutions into the search for monuments, which are in many ways, along with mascots, especially down in the States, the only places, at least until a few years ago, where Native people were predominantly represented. Next. This desire can sometimes manifest in seemingly, well, in inappropriate and sometimes apparently ludicrous ways. This is the Asatru Folk Assembly. This is a still from the film Violence of Civilization Without Secrets, which was made by Adam Khalil, Zach Khalil, and with myself, where upon discovery of the Kennewick Man, there were many claims which became popularized and perhaps confined to apparently extremist ideologies, which really thirsted for the possibility that the Kennewick Man might provide evidence of European origin prior to North American settlement. I'm going to pass it over to Kite, but this is in some ways a approach to the foundations of the formation of this country, which we align with wanting to feel at home here and merging with Indigenous people in order to become Native.
Thanks for that intro to NRO. Hamantaki an Pitu Washte, Susan Kadamacha Pikusto, Glala Hamacha, I'm a Glala Lakota, Tante Washte Nape Chiozapo. My relatives, I shake your hands with a happy heart. Currently, Muskogee Creek Reservation, or Tulsa, Oklahoma, LWAT. I am living in Tulsa, calling in from Tulsa. So I'm just going to give the background to my practice. I mostly do performance art and composition, kind of experimental sound. And this is kind of what my performances usually look like. I make body interfaces, especially hair braid interfaces and sculptures. Let's see. Most of my work involves machine learning and performance with video and sound live. And so this is a piece called Listener, my first piece I made with machine learning. Most of my research has to do with kind of an idea of non-human futures, which actually the first time I presented on that was on a panel with Jackson at MIT. And I'm mostly thinking about how indigenous ontologies, especially relationships with non-humans expressed in Lakota ontology, can be used to interrogate AI ethics as they stand now and generate new models for artificial intelligence ethics and technology and engagement with objects overall through art making. You know, I have a bunch of projects with this. One of them is this piece, Telling Rock, a collaboration with Devin Ronneberg, which is a machine learning sculpture inspired from my grandfather's stories and teachings. I have two kind of more major publications on my AI research. One is Making Kin with Machines, a collaboration between Jason Lewis, Nolan Arista, Archer Pachowis, and myself. And then this very large position paper called Indigenous Protocols and Artificial Position paper from our working group. So, and then I'm talking about ethics. But another major interest of mine is ideas of American mythology making and place making, and this is definitely where I've intersected with the interest and research of New Right Order. So really thinking about how, so this is an upcoming paper that's about to be published in a research journal. I don't think I can say which one until they like put it out themselves, but it's made it through review miraculously. And I'm trying to, trying to understand how the ownership of time and space are expressed through new mythology making in the United States and probably in Canada too. Thinking about how conspiracies and mythologies and ufology and Bigfoot and American Wiccanism, like all of these things are attempts at generating a new American indigeneity, a white indigeneity, a white American religion. So I think that's where we come to this piece, and I'll play the little video.
However, as you walk, you realize there is a wall between you and this beautiful landscape made of pure white light. It surrounds you in this beautiful forest. You observe a group of incredibly beautiful beings looking directly at you with the most incredible gaze of unconditional love and soul family resemblance, remembrance. As the stars begin to shift, with constellations shifting and the light carrying the feeling, the love and the support of so many races of light, Lemuria. For those who are new here, and for those who have been here a long time, coming home is not always easy, but it is easy to be welcomed with open hearts and open arms, and I promise you that both sides will come to the same place of understanding and compassion. There is no stepping back from the path. To be afraid of the unknown. You came to the stars. You wanted to know, where did you come from? Were you ready to find the answers?
Yeah, do you want to talk about the installation, Jackson, while I go through the photos?
Yeah, if I could. This will be a little bit improvisatory, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we can just name, I mean, what the elements that are in the show. There's the film, which was shot in Hawaii. We've got 2 objects, which we'll talk about, a lot of crystals, a lot of plants, and some other Hawaiian detritus, I'd say.
Yeah, I guess to start with the film and the circular screen. The film tracks the adventure. This is also understanding who the Lemurians are is, you know, a tricky and perhaps tenuous enterprise. And
I can get to that when we get to the TikToks. Explain who they are.
I'm just prefacing this.
Yeah.
So approaching the idea of the last Lemurian is to approach the possibility of perhaps one giving up, exploring, giving up, and converting into a new understanding of what the aspects of the search to become Lemurian entail or implicate. So, but this cannot be done without the enactment of the journey. So in terms of what Lemurian is, Kite will expand upon that further, but this entails through the film, the approach into the water, the search for the portal through the cave to understand what it is to travel into a different realm, which transports oneself into a different reality, an ability to understand the claim on a landscape or something that's more submerged. Those are all aspects of this film, which involve along the way collection of rocks that are involved in lava tubes, and then approaching a kind of sensing or care that might have the side effects, at least at the time, of evading an understanding of what it is to be Indigenous at the same, or at least Indigenous people. Which also involves, if we go back to the last slide, which also involves a confrontation with denial of contemporaneity that pushes Indigenous people as prior. So Lemurian connections aim to a prior beyond. This is where we get to the kind of the sticky formations of understanding Lemurian evolutionary unpacking, that there is a prior to even early human development, which involves perhaps the fantasy of interaction to connect with that prior. And in some ways entails a confrontation with a light source. I mean, there's not really any other way around it. And an ability to reflect on one's own both appropriateness in doing so, one's own protection, one's own entanglement with an excessive reflexivity, and perhaps an abject formation and experience that one might have to go through in order to come out the other side.
So I'm going to talk about what Lemurian is and how I became obsessed with it. I'll start with these TikToks.
If you have an unexplained fear of the ocean, it might be linked to the destruction of Atlantis. The Arcturian Council came out with a statement that everyone who is alive during the golden age of Aquarius lived either a lifetime on Lemuria or Atlantis, or both. Both cities were advanced civilizations with sustainable technology, spiritual healing, and a deep understanding of emotions. For as long as I can remember, I've had a fascination with the ocean, dolphins and whales, but I've also been so afraid of the ocean and of drowning. If you feel the same way, this could be a sign that you lived a life on Atlantis. Some other qualities that you can have are a fascination with crystals. You are drawn to the healing arts such as Reiki. You feel trapped on Earth. You experience deja vu. You might be sensitive to light, heat, and sound, an urge to find your twin flame, and a very strong desire to find your soul group. It just makes too much sense.
Way too much sense. All right, let's hear what some of these other people have to say.
You may have heard about Lemuria, the ancient legendary continent. But have you heard Lemurian language? I speak this language along with 6 others, and here is what it sounds like. It's full of motherly, feminine energy, quite opposite to the language of Atlantis that I speak as well, which is the masculine. So listen to this and feel this energy. Ina ma'a, oma eda eda, ama'a, ina ma'a, oma na e, alaba, eta ala, ina ma edia a, odi ia ale, ela ma, ade ia ma, ina ma, ade ia, ala eta.
All right, and then here's another version of that. All right. Okay. And then finally, this one, which I will elaborate on, because this is what got me fully pulled in.
Quick trigger warning, this video is going to be talking about the fall of Lemuria, which a lot of you have had past lifetimes there. So please don't watch this if you're feeling very sensitive right now, or do, it's good to heal. Anyways, this part, when I read this part, I could not stop crying. They held hands and all sang together as they sank. I'm talking about like singing until their mouths are full of water. The reason they did this was because every time something that traumatic happens to a soul, it leaves a scar on the etheric body, which takes many lifetimes to recorrect. So by standing together and trying to hold that fearlessness and that frequency of love, they were trying to lessen that damage.
Okay, so I must elaborate on this because this is a so what is Lemuria? Lemuria emerges out of this book called The Secret Doctrine, which is theosophy. This is a channeling done by a woman named Madame Blavatsky. It's a synthesis of science, religion, and philosophy, and it's kind of expanded over many years to become a favorite topic of the famed fake anthropologist David Hatcher Childress. So if you ever watch Ancient Aliens, he's on it every time, and he has a really interesting way of developing truth, which is making false statements in the form of question in order to lead your brain into creating apophenia, which is the human brain trying to take random occurrences and make connections between them. And there's a lot of really interesting, research about this in relationship to ufology. But what's really interesting about Lemuria is it's connected to Mount Shasta and the Hawaiian Islands, and people who believe in this theory believe there's a lava tube running between the two locations and many other locations. So all of this, Madame Blavatsky's book, when you boil it down, is a theory of race. It's and what's interesting about these theories of root races, and Lemuria is like the 4th root race, is who comes out on top? The Aryan race. More intelligent, more beautiful, more evolved. So all of this is a reaction against Darwinism. At the time, evolution was an emerging theory. But what's interesting about theosophy is, and Madame Blavatsky is the initial push towards any New Ageism that we know today. So auras, astral projection, chakras, spirit guides, Age of Aquarius, it all comes out of this theosophical writing. And most interesting to me, this is still very connected to Nazism and to white supremacy. And a lot of these all these racial theories were pushed by this. And so there's been this resurgence and an interest in Lemuria and a kind of rush for people to move. I mean, there's a lot of people who move to Hawaii for many reasons, but many of them think that they belong there spiritually. And so this Lemurian is the excuse they use, that their soul is from, literally, they think their soul is from Hawaii. So to come back to this singing, so the whole theory is that there's, the whole theory is that there's there's the Atlantis and then Lemuria, and they were in a war, and Lemuria lost, and so Lemurians were drowned, and Atlanteans were drowned. So the thing is that the story that they're telling is actually a story stolen from the Igbo people of what is now Nigeria, and there's it's called the, it's this story of slaves coming to America and refusing to be enslaved, and instead choosing to have a mass drowning. And that is like the ultimate lifting of a historic and mythological story that doesn't belong to these mostly white people who think they're Lemurian. Anyway. So I think the last thing I wanted to share was about the language model. So in the exhibition, the sound includes composition by Devin Ronneberg, and then a script read by myself. And this script, it comes out of this research I've been doing with the GPT-2 model, comes out of this language models, or unsupervised multitask learners paper. And an important caveat to these GPT-2 models, admitted by the researchers, is their biases and factual inaccuracies that it auto-generates. And so, let's see, I'm gonna share these other, can you see that? Yeah. So this was our model that Jackson and I worked on, and it's basically, you create a bibliography of text for the model to be trained off of. So in here, we've got the paper that I wrote, What's on the Earth is in the Stars. And we've got the script from Last of the Mohicans. We've got huge swaths of this Volume 2, Secret Doctrine Volume 2. What else do we have in here? We've got a little bit of decolonization is not a metaphor.
I would say that we can't name everything that's in there.
Yeah, there's so much. We just kept dumping things, and then I think the final version was very weighted in order because the form it comes out in. But really, in the end, we weighted meditation scripts. So if you go on YouTube, there's a lot of guided meditations to help you remember your life in Lemuria. And so in the end, I was able to generate a lot of text based on that. So this is an example of a transcribed Lemurian guided meditation. You notice blah, blah, you feel the cold water, take a deep breath, breathing in and out, like your typical guided meditation. And so in the end, we were able to output large swaths of guided meditations. And it's quite clear that it comes out racist, because what's interesting about the emergent possibilities of AI text generation is the thing that is at the core of it often emerges. And so I never talked about Plato's Cave, even though Jackson and I, it's not remotely in any of the texts, but Jackson and I talked about Plato's Cave a bunch in terms of the shooting and looking for caves in Hawaii. And in the end, the script talked about Plato's Cave. And, there's nothing that's directly about white supremacy that's like blankly, directly white, like says like Aryans are superior, but it emerges in the text, which I think is very interesting.
Maybe a little Siri.
Huh?
I think Alexa and Siri might have had a little influence there as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it also produced a lot of YouTube intros and outros. So you can auto-generate your YouTube intro and outro. I think that's what I have to share. And I want to say, like, thank you especially to my my research assistant, studio assistant, Bettina Perez, who helped install this, and Devin for composing the music, and everybody who listened to me ramble about aliens and Nazis for the past, 3 years.
Great, thank you so much, Kite and Jackson. So open up to the floor if anybody has any questions. That was such a really rich and interesting presentation. I'm not even sure where to start. I feel like many neurons are firing in my brain, and it's hard to pick one. But maybe I'll start from the end and then work backwards. So with the AI, I'm assuming that the AI only works in English. Is that correct? Like, would it be possible to
I have tried to have it produce Lakota, and it comes out so racist sounding that it's amazing. I've never tried it in French or anything though.
Because I'd be interested too if you could like feed it the transcription from that TikToker who was speaking Lemurian and see whether or not
it would come out. Yeah, it would produce that if it was weighted correctly. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's really interesting, and just like how, like these technologies can produce language that is inherently racist, but also, the fact that this person is able to insinuate that she is able to speak a language that's not existent, but then these technologies can effectively reify that okay, now that it's been reproduced, therefore it is real, that this kind of mechanical reproduction gives a form of legitimacy that I think we also sort of see through the uptake of new age spiritual practices, that if enough people do it, then it becomes real in a way, right? The sort of collective thought that okay, if I just, alone in my basement apartment, if I believe I'm a Lemurian, I'm a little bonkers. But then if all of us on TikTok are out here, speaking light languages, then it's
if it produces the spiritual connection that's when I feel a lot of the desire for indigeneity is rooted in it. It's rooted in a desire for culture and spiritual belonging, and that's what's interesting about NRO is it produces an outlet. So if the Partnership for Lemurian Futures can do anything, it can invite people to use this for good, which that's kind of I feel like the double-edged sword of the AI research that we're doing, is that it can do such evil and maybe hopefully make an effect towards good in other projects like our AI ethics working group.
Yeah, I think one of the things about AI that's also interesting is speaking about the desire for indigeneity and then move to the desire to have a different kind of connection. Is the AI in some ways is a broken mimesis, similar to how many primitive people are said to attempt to mimic the contemporary, both through art, but also, prior to that. So there's a continuum, there's a continuity there that I think is interesting, at least for myself. This idea of bricolage connected to the primitive, desire for any of that kind of inspiration of non-human to influence oneself as a way to, in some ways, evade in some ways that becomes a perfect subject, because the irritant of actual indigenous people is a little bit too troublesome.
We can't hear you, Prakash.
You hear me now?
Yeah.
My mic keeps turning off. It's very strange. But yeah, no, I think that's very fascinating, and sort of how we continue to see these kind of mimicries evolve in interesting ways, take place simultaneously, across North America, but also other places. I'm from Malaysia, and there's a different concept of indigeneity that's written into the law, so people can become indigenous through legal action, but then people who are the actual first peoples of the Malaysia Peninsula or Borneo have less rights, even though it's very strange. But I think it but in Malaysia too, we see people who are adopting these sort of neo-spiritual practices to become Bumi Putera, which is the word for indigenous. Meanwhile, at the same time, also trying to convert the Orang Asli, who are like the first peoples to become Malay, that would like remove them of their indigenous rights to title the land. So everywhere is broken. Like it's not just the US, Canada's bad.
Yeah, it's so permeable and persistent. And that's, yeah, amazing what you're saying.
But I think that NRO's approach to like researching this, exploring this artistically, but through the lens of infiltration is interesting. Could you maybe like tell us a little bit more about some of your other like infiltration type projects, or like what other spaces aside from maybe Lemuria that you've been trying to infiltrate?
So Kai went on mute. So, okay. I guess in some ways, even any interaction in the art world and its institutions becomes an infiltration, to the point where we can make works that is almost as if we're mimicking contemporary art. So that in some ways becomes a mode of infiltration that we also think can have multiple motives, among them to allow people to express their perhaps inappropriate desire for indigeneity. That can allow for a different kind of relationship ultimately. So this method of calling in instead of only calling out, but to call in, has been really important, and that involves sometimes sticky interplay with multiple institutions. But yeah, I guess I would say that that's one thing I'm thinking, not only in terms of NRO practices, but in recent NRO exhibitions, this idea of miming contemporaneity.
Mm-hmm. Kai, did you have anything you wanted to add? Because I know that you're also involved in the university.
In terms of infiltration, I don't know. I have to exist every day. I think that's enough infiltration for me. I'm sure I could think of some things, but it's not like the center of my practice. I think I just try to balance this this work with technology that's both trying to deal with ontology and doing it through epistemologies for good and maybe epistemologies for evil. I really like manipulating my audience.
I love that. Listen, manipulate them, get your money, accolades, whatever it takes to make life a little bit more livable. I support it 100%.
Could I ask the Lemurian project is also like maybe it's like the first step, because you've done several projects in various like in I don't want to say episodes, but like iterations. So you were talking about the fact that this was like the first of maybe, and that maybe you would want to pursue this relationship, I could use as a word.
Yeah, part of the foundational NRO practices is to acknowledge one's own kind of condition as an informant. And similar to the idea of calling in, to invite others to inform with us, which is in some ways seem like it might involve infiltrative modes, but ultimately the goal is to work toward a different kind of reciprocity, which might be like even announcing the kind of possibility for a different relationality could attract those who want that kind of relationality and identify it as something indigenous. So there might be something seemingly inappropriate about those people who are attracted and feel like a certain degree of permission to engage with indigenous people. So this is also always something that we're simultaneously flagging and invoke the appearance of infiltrative modes and also perform infiltrative modes. But ultimately the desire is for some kind of rechanneling of that desire. So with the Lemurian project, there's this similar thing where we were able to interact with some members of the Lemurians, but this is an ongoing process of developing trust and to approach some kind of reciprocity. So it will involve return visits and the possibility that there could be co-editing involved and a different kind of similar to how we worked with other people who eventually act as proxy for the NRO to flag plain Indian while doing it. So that there could be that kind of reflexivity involved and awareness. You know, there's always a danger with excess reflexivity too, because it can involve people taking up too much space and reflecting on their own kind of processing of their own uncomfortability with proximity to Indigenous people or Indigenous epistemologies. However, I feel like it's still a necessary tool to allow for people to actually change their minds.
I would like to play Lemurian one day, but I'm not 7 foot tall, Aryan blonde, and my third eye hasn't popped out of my head yet. Maybe one day.
Listen, there's always time to grow. We can get some really, really tall stilettos, and then I think we can make it work. That can be the next the next exhibition, performance out of Clark, 7 foot tall kite. Okay, we're running quite low on time. Sorry, what's that, Jackson?
Sorry, we dream until it becomes our reality. Magical.
Exactly. Just so you know, manifest it, you know, whisper into the crystals. I'm not sure how crystals work, but I'm assuming you whisper into them, right? A lot of them look like they have mouths or ears. So
I mean, Jackson was talking about magical criticism the other day, and that kind of relates to that also. So in another way.
Yeah, we've worked with Christopher Bracken and employed quite a bit of his unpacking of the ways in which magical thinking is often ascribed to primitive and savage people, but it persists in many, like almost every avenue of those who are trying to come up with new ways of thinking creatively. Poetry, for example. And I think this idea of, you know, there's a lot of attraction toward Indigenous epistemologies and what Kite was talking about with non-human worlds. So I think that becomes another instance where there are already channels forming of attraction toward indigeneity in that way, which run the risk of being another instance of the permeable and persistent desire to play Indian. So, however, we also recognize that this is an opportunity to allow discourse to deploy forces and to enact change. That's where I'll start.
Great. I think that's a great place to end for all of us to sort of think about the ways that we too can, you know, be informants, the ways too that we can maybe tell on the questionable people around us, just so, you know, we're all stay safe and aware. But I'd like to thank everyone for being here. Thank you to Jackson and Kite, to Shani, to Roberto. Yeah, this was like really informative. I had a great time. And yeah, Roxanne, do you have any final thoughts, words to share?
No, just sad we didn't have time to have like questions, but it is already 7. So I guess if there's ever anything, people can reach you somewhere, right? People can ask you questions somewhere.
Yeah, don't be afraid to reach out at newredorder.org and also 1-888 New Red 1.
We should have like a slide with that number just going through the screen. Okay, yeah.
All now, operators.
Maybe put the number in the chat, please, so we can have it in our recorded files. We'll leave some messages. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. This was like so different from one to the other, and this is why I love having these conversations all at the same time. Thank you so much, Prakash, for everything, and stay safe. It's season change time. We're all a little bit sick, or, you know, could be, so take care. everyone.
Thank you, Bob and Shanae. It was amazing to see your work.
Ciao.